So in this video, we're going to add in two building sections as well as a wall section, a ceiling, and then do some renderings in it. Now, whenever you do a building section, it's always kind of good practice to try to cut through wherever like an opening is. So I'm going to do one building section through the building right here, kind of looking towards this way. And I'm going to do another building section here, looking towards this way. The shortcut to put a building section is right up here in this quick access toolbar. It's the one that looks like a little section head. And then what you're going to do is click where you want your section to start approximately, where you want your section to end, and then it has created a new little area here in our project browser for sections. Now mine, based on this little box here, is facing towards this window. And as I mentioned, I kind of wanted it facing this way, so I can easily just click on that little arrow to flip it. And then I often use the arrow keys on my keyboard to kind of nudge the section head or nudge the section line a little bit more. Another thing I really like to do, and you always want to make sure too that you have these pulled out past your dimensions. So I don't have any dimensions on this side, but I want to make sure that that goes past. This would go past on this side as well. Is I'll often cut my section into two by just clicking on that little break there, and then you can move these gaps over. If you wanted to put a section head on this side as well, you can just use this button. You'll have to hit it twice. You can have section heads on both sides. And I'm just going to pull this scope here to go towards this side as well, because I want it to show the whole building, even with like not visible in my view. Now to look at this section cut, I can either double click on this arrow, and that'll open up my section view, or I could look at it through just double clicking on it in here. Now right now I have thin lines turned on for my last step, so I'm going to turn thin lines off, which is just keyboard shortcut TL, so we can see a little bit of the line weight, and we can see also like this problem we have here of like there's not a ceiling, so this wall kind of just abruptly stops at level 2. Then there's also kind of nothing that separates this closet area from this bedroom. I'm going to right click on this bed and just hide that element because I don't need that visible in this view. So I want to add a ceiling in. Now there is a specific tool to add ceilings, but honestly I'm not a huge fan of it. I think kind of an easier tool to use for a project like this would be to use a floor and just put it on level 2. It's a little bit more accurate. I would only ever use this if I was doing like a drop ceiling style like we're going to do in our commercial project. So I'm going to go into my level 1 floor plan, and I'm going to start the floor tool, and instead of making a floor on level 1, I'm going to make this floor on level 2, and I want to adjust this height offset. This is just left over from the last time we made a floor. I'm going to give it a height offset of 0. Then I'm going to change my floor type by clicking here. Really, you could use either of these two. It's not really going to matter. I'm going to go into edit type. I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm just going to call this one ceiling, and then edit its structure, and I'm going to get rid of the finish here. I'm going to get rid of this plywood layer, and then I'm going to insert a layer and move it all the way down below the core boundary. So essentially this is going to be my ceiling, this is going to be my ceiling joist, and I want to keep note too that it's made out of a 2x10. So its function, I'm going to give as finish, and its material, I'm going to click on my ... and I'm going to make it gypsum wallboard. And then a thickness of, we'll do another 1/2 inch piece here. And then I'll click OK. I'll click OK again. To make my floor around my whole piece, I'm just going to hover over here, or make my ceiling rather, hit Tab, and then click. So I'm going across the entire thing. And then I'm going to click OK. When it asks me if I want to attach my walls to this floor, I usually say don't attach. Not every time, but I'm going to say don't attach here. And then when it asks me if I want to join my overlapping geometry, I should say yes, but I'm going to click no just to show you how it could be pretty easily solved. So I'm going to click on no. So yes would typically be my answer. If I go into my section 1, I now have this ceiling here on level 2, and we can see kind of these awkward little overlaps between each piece. So what I want to do to solve this is, again, I need to have thin lines turned off, because if I have thin lines on, I can't really see what needs to get joined. And I'm going to use join geometry to bring all these pieces together. So you can click on anything at all in your drawing, and this button here for join geometry will pop up. Or in the very first video, we set a keyboard shortcut of JJ for join. And I want to join the footing to the foundation wall. And we'll see here now that that kind of cleaned up that connection. We're going to join the foundation wall to the floor to the building wall. And so we can really now see kind of everything clean up. If you said yes to join geometry, your ceiling already is attached nicely, but I'm just going to do wall to ceiling and then wall to roof. I'm going to need to attach the ceiling to this wall, and then the same thing on this side. I'll do footing to foundation, foundation to floor, floor to wall, wall to ceiling, wall to roof. So you're kind of thinking of your 4 main construction components and joining them all together for this here. We'll do that again, and this time we'll do it on another drawing or another section. So I'm going to go back into my level 1, and this time I'm going to make a section cut that goes through here. So I'm going to make another building section, which is this button up here. And I'm going to go through this window and that doorway, and see how it kind of overlaps that text there. I'm going to try to just use my arrow keys to nudge it as much as possible. I still want to make sure I'm going through this window and this door. I'm going to break the segment up and move that tail out a little bit. Break these out a little. I'm going to cycle through so I have a section head, and then this is looking towards this way. And let's look at our section number 2, which I can double click here, or I can double click on those arrowheads. And we have a similar kind of situation going on where we need to sort of clean some things up. So I'm going to JJ for join, the footing to the foundation wall to the floor, floor to my building wall, wall to ceiling, ceiling to roof, ceiling to this wall, floor to this wall. You don't necessarily have to do them in any particular order, but I usually work my way down from a building because it makes it easier to make sure that I've gotten everything. But I'm just joining all the geometry up here and then joining my way through the building as well. And so then I've got my building sections for both of those areas. I'm going to go into my 3-dimensional view for a moment, because at this point, I no longer need this CAD file. So I'm going to click on this CAD file and just use the delete key on my keyboard to get rid of it, because it was a little bit in my way at the moment. And then I got my 2 building sections ready to go. I still need to do a small amount of cleaning them for paper space, but we'll deal with that in the next video, primarily like cropping them and getting them to fit nice. The next one we're going to do then is what's called a wall section. And there's kind of 2 ways of going about creating a wall section. And so we'll do one on this wall right here. We can do is we can go into the View tab, and we can create what's called a call-out view. And with a call-out, I'm just going to click and drag around an area. So I'll click in one corner and another, and that's made this zoomed in version of that view. This is okay. It's not my preferred method, but it is definitely a method we could use. So I'm just going to delete that view by just clicking on it here and hitting delete. The way I kind of prefer to do a wall section is to, in my floor plan view, I'm going to come up here to the section tool. Again, my little shortcut for section. And then you can change your section type from a building to a wall section. And I'm just going to slice through here. I want to cycle through and make this one a section head as well. And I'm going to break it up so it's not overlapping a lot of those dimension lines. And then I've made a wall section. So to get into my wall section, I can either double click it here, or I can go into my wall section area and double click it here. Now what I need to do next is kind of clean up some of these views and clean up how they're looking together as well. So you'll have to excuse me because my cat just walked away from the screen. This is essentially our crop region. So if we click on this box, we can move it and expand it out if we need to or want to. And we can also break it into smaller areas. So if you remember back into our AutoCAD wall section, we had it broken down into a couple of different views. So this is kind of just explaining again what a wall section is, where we've sliced the building open on a plane, and then we are looking at just this one little area of it in there. You'll see in wall sections too, though, that they're broken into smaller areas so we can fit them at a larger scale on a piece of paper. So with this wall section, to break it into different areas, we essentially want an area that's focusing on the foundation, the footing to foundation connection, then an area that focuses on the connection of foundation wall to floor to building wall, something that's highlighting the connection of the window, something that's highlighting the header of the window and the ceiling, and then something also is highlighting the roof. To break these into smaller views, we first need to break it into just two. So you could click on this line here, and now we have an area that's looking at just the foundation. And we want to try to make this as small as we possibly can. And then we're going to extend this out to at least see our floor. Once we see our floor, we're going to click on this arrow again to cut this view down. We can maybe make it where it's showing this connection and this one. And then I'm just going to drag this arrow to move that view down. We want to try to condense them as much as possible. So then the next thing I need to look for and highlight is the top of my window. So I'm going to drag that down, crop it again, and see if I can get my ceiling in there, which I can. Drag this up, drag this down a little bit. And then my last view should just be highlighting the connection of my roof here. And then I'll drag that down as well. So I've got it highlighting my four big parts of my connection: foundation, foundation, floor, wall. We've got our window connection, our header connection, our ceiling, and then our roof. My next step would be to join all of this geometry together, which again is keyword shortcut JJ. I want footing to foundation wall to floor, floor to building wall, wall to ceiling, and then wall to roofs, which, there we go. Not sure why I had to double click, but that's okay. Maybe I misclicked the first time. So I've got it all connected. The next two things I need to consider are, what's my scale going to be? And so since I haven't done this building before, I'm going to conservatively guess that my drawing scale is going to be a 1/2 inch equals a foot. We might even have to make it a little bit larger than that, but we'll see. When I change the scale, you'll see that the hatch pattern's changed a bit. This also looks like it got smaller when in reality the drawing got bigger. The other thing we'll need to adjust is our detail level, which is this box right here, and we want a detail level of fine. So with this detail level, we're able to see all of the different connections between our different parts and pieces. I think I also need to put my floor and my finished floor here. But I've got a little layer of 1/8 inch carpet. It's kind of hard to see though in this view, but if I go into thin lines, we can sort of see my carpet layer sitting there. So at this point, let me turn thin lines back off. I've got all of my geometry joined together, and so I'll hit escape quite a few times, and I'm ready to start adding in some other components for my detail. So if you remember back to our AutoCAD drawing, and all walls are different, but we can often have like kind of typical ones. We need to show the connection of like where our floor joists are sitting, our bottom plate, our double top plate on top of our walls, as well as like our sill and our header built out in a window. So we've got another example here of a building east wall section. We've got another kind of highlighting a detail here. We've got our insulation. So we've got quite a few examples that we can look at for what needs to go into a wall section. Now, to add pieces to your wall section, you are going to want to use the Detail Component tool, which is in the Annotate tab. So this is different than the component tool that we use to put in like our kitchen stuff, because this is only 2D pieces that are view dependent, meaning whatever we add in here is only showing up in this view and showing up nowhere else in our drawing whatsoever. To load in detail components, we do follow the same strategy that we do for all other components. So that is either go into the Insert tab, and then we have Load Autodesk Family, or in video number 1, we set a custom keyword shortcut of FF. Now, all of the detail components exist in this folder called Detail Items, but you of course can also search up here. So we want pieces of dimensional lumber for this one. So we are going to go into this wood and plastic category, and then we have wood framing, and then I want nominal lumber in section, and I'm going to load that in. When I load it in, I'm going to load in like a 2x4, even though I don't need it in this view, I'm going to load it anyway. I'm going to load a 2x6, a 2x8, and a 2x10. And I'm able to select more than one because I'm just holding Control as I go to click. So I'm just holding the Control key and then clicking on the options. You can, of course, load them in one at a time, though, if you wanted to or needed to. So now that I've loaded all of those detail components in, I can, in the Annotate tab, I can use this component tool to switch between different types. So I'm going to start with like the 2x6s that go up my wall. So I know I'm going to need a 2x6 down here. I can use the space bar to flip it, and then I can just put it in right at the bottom of the wall. Sometimes it's helpful to turn thin lines on, which again is TL, to make sure you're putting stuff in the right spot. And like we're also going to have one right here at our windowsill. And we've got a few that make up our header. So we've got our bottom part of our header. We'll need to have another one here, another one here, and another one here. Sometimes when you go to place multiple detail components, it kind of spazzes out a little bit. So you can always just hit escape a bunch of times and go back into the tool and just keep placing those same ones. We're also going to have a double top plate right underneath where that ceiling sits, a bottom plate for like our attic space here, and then also a double top plate on our roof right here. This one doesn't seem to want to fit nicely, so what I could do is just place it somewhere, and then I can use the Align tool. So I can use Align to align it with, let's see if it's got an edge that I could put it on. That side to that side, and I have them locked together. And it doesn't seem to have a top that it wants to let me align it to, but what I could do is just click on it and zoom in, and then just tap, tap, tap it in with my arrow keys. The more you're zoomed in, the more detail you could tap something to. And then let me go into Annotate and one more detail component of another one of these guys. This one will let me align pretty easily because I can align that with that. And again, I always have it auto lock together. because I just find that easier. My next pieces that I'm going to have to kind of put together would be things like my roof rafter. And so I'm going to put in back and annotate another detail component, which is made out of a 2x10, or my ceiling joist rather, not my roof rafter. And I've got one here. I've also got a floor joist I've got to put in down here. And what I could do is I could definitely place these all the way going across, but like realistically, that's not how this would really get like laid out or be the efficient way to do it, because there's a tool that we can use to really help us do that a little better. So I'm going to hit escape a few times. I want to click on this floor joist, and I want to use the array function to make copies of it. So the first part of an array is to select where you're measuring from, move toward this direction you want to go, and type the amount you want, which would be 1'4" in this case, and then how many do I want in total. And I usually overshoot, so I'm going to say I want 5 in total, which put these in. They're off camera, they're out of this crop region, but it put them all in. And I'll hit escape a couple times. I'm going to turn thin lines back off. This one again, so click on my ceiling one. I'm going to do a array. Where am I measuring from? Direction I want to go, distance I want, and then how many do you want in total? So I'll say 5. I usually like to overshoot it than estimate. And so that this way we can have kind of some of our detail components going in there. We're going to keep this as a little bit more of a simplistic wall section as our first practice, but we can also try to crop this in as tight as we possibly can. And then our next piece we would also have to add that we added in AutoCAD were things like our insulation. So in Revit, we have our own specific tool for insulation right here for bed insulation. And all you have to do is determine the size you want it to be. So for our exterior walls, this is a 5.5 thick because they're 2x6s. And I'm just going to go from middle to middle. And I'll go middle to middle here. And middle to middle here. And you'll see that I don't even have to worry about that gap in between these two views. I'll hit escape once. And then I'm going to change my size to 9.25. Which, whoops, not 95, that'd be bad. Which I definitely didn't type that in. 9, what's going on here? 9.225. There we go. And I'll put in between each of these, just going from midpoint to midpoint. And this one I'm just going to make go off screen here as well. So this way, and you could draw kind of in either direction. This way we've got our insulation going in there and all of our parts. It's kind of some of the pieces to go to put together your wall section as you work through it. The last thing then that we're going to try today is just how to do a rendering and the basic capabilities of renderings. There's two methods to render something. There is the in-house Revit version of a rendering, and then there's also some extensions out there, and Twinmotion is a very popular one. I don't have it installed on this computer, so I won't be able to show it to you in this video here. But what we want to do for a rendering first is place a camera or place a perspective. So I like to do that in my level 1 floor plan. I'm going to place my camera, so I go into level 1, and the easiest way to get to the camera tool is there is a little shortcut. If you click on the arrow next to the 3D view, you have the camera tool, and then you can, excuse me, your cursor kind of turns into a camera, and it's essentially saying, where do you want the person taking the picture to stand? And I usually have them stand like a little bit far away. And then what do you want them looking at? And then we'll click again. If you don't like your camera shot, you can adjust the crop region a little bit to maybe look at it a little bit nicer, maybe zoomed a little bit better, or it has created this 3D view here. You can always just delete this view and just replace the camera. The cameras don't cost any money, so if you don't like it, just try again and place it a second time around for your perspective. So this is an exterior one that I'm going to do. To do a rendering, I'm going to go into the View tab, and then I could do a render here or a render in cloud. A render here is going to stop you from being able to use the software at all. Render in cloud essentially is going to do it on the cloud, and then it will email you when it's done. So I'm just going to do an in-house rendering. We always want to pay attention to a couple of things. One being the quality. The higher quality you put here, the longer it's obviously going to take. I'm just going to do a medium one because I know it'll be able to go pretty fast. And then we also want to pay attention to our lighting scheme. Since we didn't put any artificial lights in here, it would be really silly to do any of these artificial options. And then this is an outside view, so doing an exterior sun only makes sense. For our background, we'll leave it be for now, but often I will set it to the transparent option. And then we're just going to click on render, and we have to sit and wait for that render to finish. We cannot use anything within the software until it's done. So sometimes, depending on how big the project is and how complicated it is, this render may take like hours to complete. In the case of this building, it's not that complicated, and my computer has a pretty okay graphics card, so it was able to complete it in a couple of seconds. What I need to do next, before I close out, if I'm happy with this and I'm satisfied with it, I need to either click on Save to Project, or I need to click Export. Because if I don't save it as like outside, if I don't hit save, if I just close out, it's gone forever and I've lost it. And so now I've got this area that has that render in there. This is just a raster image. So what that means is this is a series of just pixels. It has no connection to the actual model itself. So if I decide in level 1 that I just want to remove these windows, they're gone from my level 1 plan. They're gone from my south elevation view. They still exist in this render because of the fact that this is completely separate from the model. But I'm just going to Control Z, undo that, because I do in fact want those windows there. Let's also do another render, but this time we'll do like the inside and we'll look at the kitchen. So I could place a camera through here, or by clicking on 3D here, I could do a camera, and I could click where I want the person standing and what I want them looking at, which I don't like that one. So I'm going to go back into my level 1 view. I'm just going to place a new one. So I'm going to go camera. I'm going to place them kind of standing in this corner looking at the kitchen. It's really small and condensed, but I can zoom out and I could adjust this crop region. That way I'm just able to see like a little bit more of what's going on. And then I can go in my view tab. I can click on render, and I'll adjust my setting to be like a medium quality. And this, you want to make sure that you set your scheme to say interior, but like sun only. If we had placed some artificial lights in here, we could render them, but we didn't. So I'm going to do interior sun only, and I'm going to click on render. Again, it'll take a few seconds, minutes, maybe even. It's all going to depend on how complicated the model is and how good the computer may be. But I'm able to get this rendering of my inside of my house. We're still not done yet, but we can see a pretty good preview. for it. You'll see here my cabinet's just gray because I didn't apply any materials to it when I made that extrusion. So if I wanted to use the in-house render, I would have to then stop it, go apply a material to this component, and then start it up again. I'm going to click on Save to Project, and I'm going to call this one Kitchen, and I could even then click on this component, edit in place, click on it, edit its material, and then like rerun that rendering if I wanted to or needed to. But I really don't use the in-house render all that much. Let me hit cancel here. Kind of what I prefer using are some of those different extensions. Sure, we'll save our project. And I want to see, I feel like I did install Twinmotion on here, even though I use Enscape. I do feel like I put Twinmotion on. So let me just remove my section box for a minute. In order to launch Twinmotion, you do have to be in a three-dimensional view. If you're on one of the Catherine Harper laptops, you have to come down to your search bar or desktops and first search Twinmotion for Revit, which it does look like I have it installed. And you have to launch it here. We gotta wait a moment. Okay, cool, I do have it open. And then just leave it open, and then you can go into your building here, and then in the View tab, you have a Twinmotion option, and you can open in Twinmotion. If you're on your own laptop and you've installed Twinmotion, you shouldn't need to come down here and search it. But opening in Twinmotion is going to essentially sync it to there. And we want to start a new project. And we'll give it a minute. Close that. There we go. If I hit that close. And so I have my building here. If I want to move around, I'm going to use the WASD key. We see here that we've got like a little shortcuts. I would recommend setting your speed. You use the numbers 1 through 6 to do it. I like the speed 3. It moves fairly slow, but I like that. I would never recommend going up to like the speed 6. And you do unfortunately just kind of phase through things like walls and windows. The Q and E keys move you up and down, and then you can click and drag to kind of orbit. You can look around. Don't worry, I'll show you how to get rid of that weird thing as well. Really, where Twinmotion shines is especially for things like interior design in there. So we didn't really add a lot of furniture and things. If you want to get rid of this big stupid ball, we can just hide this whole starting base, and then it goes away. If I wanted to add furniture and pieces, I can use the objects, and then I could do home. I could do office stuff. Maybe an office chair wouldn't be great, but so let me actually go back. I'll do living room stuff, sofas, and I could pick out which one I want. You can load assets in, though I'm pretty unfamiliar with it, but you can pick the piece you want, which face do you want to apply it to. So I could put it on the ceiling if I wanted to. And once you have it placed, you can hit escape a few times and you can click on it. You can orbit it around. You can move it on any of those axes. You could just move it in general. You could even move it up, so if it's a piece that would need to be floating, but not sure why I would want that floating. But let's say I've got a table and I've got this right here. And then if I wanted to put, say, a plant or a lamp on top of it, you can have it snap to it directly. But if something's giving you issues with that, you can, of course, just orbit it around. And there's also some lighting features in here as well. And these lamps will, let's not put that on a wall. We can actually then have that illuminate in pieces and stuff. So Twinmotion's great for interior design and doing some of those renders. Let me get out of the house as well. It's also pretty good for exteriors of doing renderings for like if a project's being bid on. So if I go back into my library, I can add in environments. So I could add in various outdoor ones. Some of these do require you to sign in with an account. So see how that has that download arrow? That means I have to be signed in order to use it. But like this one, I can apply by just clicking and dragging it. And we'll give it a moment to load in. Which I can hear the fan in my computer chugging along. And then we can also, realistically, we would have a site built out in Revit anyway, but since we don't, we could use features like this populate tool to bring in grass and like foliage. So I can use the foliage option to paint. You'd want to make sure that you choose what grass you want, or even bushes. We could just put a bunch of paint bushes around, or we can realistically just place those ones. But if I go into populate, can I actually do this one? Oh yeah, I can. And then I can just make it where there's like a big area of bushes just there. So I can paint big or small. You can put that diameter down. So I can go back here into like grasses. I could pick out the grass I want to put in. And then, well, I've still got that bush there, so I want to delete that bush first. And then we can kind of add in big parts of grass. We can add in dandelions. We can add in a heck of a lot of stuff here with this populate tool. You can also, in the populate tool, if you've got a really big area that maybe is like more urban, you can put in a direct place, but you can also put in paths. So if I wanted to put in like people biking around my area or my building, I can put in, and I'm just clicking to place points. And as I zoom out then, we could see people kind of biking around. And once I get out of that pathway, we can just see them going. I can change how fast they're biking. I can change how many people are biking in there. I probably want it to be pretty small amount. You can even have them where they're going in different ways. How cool is that? The other path that I like is this character one. So again, then if I've got a really populated area and I want to kind of really show it being somewhere where there's a lot of people, we can have people walking. We can really disperse those people on a big spot. We can have a lot of people or a little people. You can have them where they're just standing around. Feel very powerful doing all of this. And you can even change a little bit of how they look and who's there depending on, again, what the project is and the client. So twin motion can be really fun to work with and play around. Let me just go back to this tool. But it's not really like necessarily required for a class like this where we're focusing on construction documents, but really helpful for when you're in some of those studio classes. To save anything from Twinmotion, you would go into the export panel, and this is where you can save something as just a direct image or screenshot, or you can take like a video. Again, you do have to be signed in to an Epic Games account to do any exporting. And I'll be honest, I made one, but I don't remember what my password is. So I'm not going to save this at all. If I close out, I could save my progress. I'm just going to click no, because you want to make sure that you save your progress here. So you're going to want to make sure that you save your Revit work. In our next video, we're going to focus on